Probably not name those things. Maybe 5 people make a club.
Okay, so how's everybody doing?
Great.
Excellent. One person is great. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. It's 3:30. Course logistics. I just wanted to mention that my office hours this Friday are going to be a little delayed. So I'll be there this Friday from 2:30 to 4. Unfortunately, I'm just going to be out until that time. But normally they'll be 1 to 3. And they were today. No one came by. But there's no real assignments. So your teams ought to be set. I think that I have 5 or 6 teams that are up there right now. As far as I know, everyone is a team of 3. If everyone is a team of 3, then everybody can have their own individual Mac Mini and phone to work on. Okay? Question. You don't have a team.
Only one sole member must be 16 people in this class.
Okay, so yeah, so there, as far as I know, there are 6 people not on a team in the class, or that haven't told me that they're on a team via the discussion board. So on the discussion board as well, just there's another thing that you can actually be like, hey, I'm not on a team. This is my interest. Who else wants to be a part of it? Also, since we're having lab right after this, like, get on a team. Yeah, like, you know, there's going to be 6 people, or if there's 3 people out of the 6 that just haven't, like, you know, gotten on a team yet, then you guys can get together, form a team, and call it good, right? And we'll assign the Mac Minis and everything during the lab, right? And so everyone will, if that's the case, everyone will just kind of get their own that they can prototype on, and no one will have to share or overlap or anything with the hardware, okay? All right, happiness. So everyone should have access to this room. I don't know how many people have tried, but I am told as of basically yesterday sometime, all of that went through, so you have card swipe access to this room. If you have card swipe access to this room, that means you can get on the Mac Minis. Does everybody know the code to get into the cabinet? Yes. Unless I hear a no, I'm not going to say it out loud. Okay, good. So once you get the Mac Mini, you know what? We'll go over that during the lab, right? Once you get the Mac Mini, we'll go over the password and how to get on and everything, okay? As far as I know, every single team wants to use part of the hardware, so that's fine. Question?
Access to the room. We also have access to the building. That's a result.
When does this building close?
I don't know.
Usually that door in the back is open.
Does it even close on the weekend? I've never had a problem getting it.
I've never actually had to use my building key, is why I asked.
Yeah, I've been here on
You have
Sunday.
access, I know, professionally designed where you have access to what users do, but you can use it at the front door.
At the front door?
That's where it's before.
Okay. What I will do is put in a request also, just in case that is not the case, that you don't have access into the building. And then we'll be able to issue you swipe access into the building as well. Right? That's swipe access to get in through? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so that's all the logistics that I have right now. Good. Okay, so I want to do an Objective-C review very, very quickly for all the stuff that we did last time, because we went kind of fast, right? So this right here is something we didn't go over. This syntax right here where you see the brackets around your interface, that is how you would declare a primitive as part of your class member. Okay, and whether or not you do that in the .h or the .m file is whether it's public or private. Okay, some of the things that we went over last time, these both are properties, right? Because the @ property, strong, non-atomic, the type defined that property is, and it's a string. Each property is given a backing variable, which is an underscore and then your backing variable, right? It's the same name as the property. okay, unless you assign it something different, right? So this @synthesize directive that I have right up there says @synthesize a string equals underscore a string. If you don't put that in there, as of basically the newest version of Xcode, the compiler puts that in for you. So if you don't include that, it's put in for you, okay? So the underscore a string already exists, okay? This is the getter that we went over last time, which is the same name as the property. And then it's basically where you define all of the things that you want to check when someone is getting access to that backing variable. This is the setter, right, where you'll notice that it's here set and then the variable name, a string. It capitalizes the first letter for you in the set function. And then basically this is where you would set whatever you put in to the backing variable. Okay, if you access the backing variable, say down here, I've created this property, a dictionary. I never synthesize it, but the compiler creates it. This backing variable, can you guys see the mouse? Okay. So this backing variable, it is created down here. And this is how I get access to that without going through the setter or getter. If I want to go through the setter or getter in my code, it would be self.aDictionary. Okay, and then it would go through the setter or the getter. By the way, that's how you define a dictionary, with key value pairs, okay? And you can iterate through the dictionary in the way that I've done here. So ID key in dictionary, and you can access this very Pythonic, right? So underscore a dictionary, and then the key that's there. This is an array, which we went over last time, and how you iterate through an array for ID object in my array. If they're all the same object, instead of saying ID right here, you could say whatever that object is, NS number, okay? And that way the compiler would know exactly what functions are available for that object. And by the way, if you want to get into the primitive class member, you do it like you normally would in C, right? It's just the pointer, right? So self afloat. Happiness? And if that's in your public implementation, I think you can use dot notation.
And why would you do property instead of a primitive?
Primitives can't be properties. Ints, floats, things like that, they have to be encapsulated. So if you wanted a float, you would declare it as an NS number.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it would be encapsulated. And there's some good reasons for that, which we'll get into. Yeah.
Do you write getters and setters for the primitives? Should you?
Yeah, not really. If you want to use getters and setters, I would encapsulate them with the next step stuff. So the NS number or NS string, that kind of thing. Okay? Use the encapsulation that's already built in for you.
And then you said, so there's no need for the @synthesize anymore in the new Xcode.
If you don't include it, right? If you put it there, it's easier to read your code, right? If someone comes along and they can see it, right? If you put it there, it's for readability. If it's not there, the compiler adds it for you. Okay? So try and put it in there. I'm not going to take off points if you don't have it in there. Happiness, questions? Good. What's your name? Hector. Thank you. Good. Okay. Other things, we also went over Objective-C function examples, right? So here is a function that is defined in Objective-C. You have the return type, you have the function name, you have the parameter, and you have the parameter type. Okay? And if you wanted to call that function, you would do it this. Here is your receiver. This is what's going to receive the message that you're sending it. The message that you're sending is the function with that parameter. Any questions on how to call a function in Objective-C? Good, happiness, all right, just making sure. You can also define functions as you would normally in C. So here, float, add 1 to number, my num, return this, and you can call it exactly like you would in C code, right? If you have a function that you want to have multiple parameters to, everything's going to be the same except the second parameter you are going to give a name to, right? So this is the name of the second parameter, and this is the second parameter. And if you were going to call that from code, it would look like this, right? You're sending a message to the receiver self, add to number, the first parameter, with other number, the name of the parameter, and then the parameter. I just said parameter, I don't know how many times. Does that come out okay? Is that clear? All right. You'll have to have a unique name for each parameter. And the reason that these names exist are to make, when you're reading this code, to make it read like what it does, right? So your function would be add number, and the parameter would be with another number, right? And that kind of, as you're reading that out, it's, okay, add to number 4 with other number 67, and it kind of explains itself what the function does, okay? Okay, programmatic UI creation, which we went over a little bit last time, and I ended up creating a button that was invisible and you could not press, okay? Did everybody get that email on the explanation of why that was? Okay, good. So when you want to create a button programmatically, what you actually should do is use this UI button type system right there, and that's going to create all of the things in the background to make that button exactly what the default system button should look like, okay? So we instantiate the button here. You basically add a target. The target that you add is self. It's you as the view controller, right? It's going to be sending the message back to you. You're the target. And the action that it's going to be sending is for this function, which is update label from program button, which is basically something we did last time. For the control event, UI control event touch down, okay? So here, last time I think we did touch up, right? So you could press the button, and as you released it, this target would be sent. This one right here, as you press down, immediately that's going to send the target. That's going to send the action to the target, right? And then you can set the attributes here. Okay, so I just want to make sure that that is completely good here. So what I've done is I've updated this code that we wrote last time so that you are actually creating a button. And you'll notice what I'm doing here. This new button, I'm actually calling alloc init, right? So I'm not using this UI button type system, okay? So I'm alloc initting this right here. I can still set up the target and the action. I can set the title, but the one thing that I didn't do last time that I needed to do was to set the title color, because the default title color is white, right? Which means it's on a white background and you cannot see the button, okay? So I set the title color to a blue color whenever it's in the normal control state. And now if I were to run this, yeah, 4-inch, sure. So if I were to run this on the emulator, what we're going to get is P button, which is created from the program, and then this alloc init button, which is right here. You'll notice it's bigger. It does not follow all of the things. If I click on it, you can't even really tell that I'm clicking on it. If I click on this, oh, look, it's got nice little animations associated with it. I haven't done any of that with this. I've just alloc inited it, and it does work as a button. Anyway, I just wanted to go over what that looked like, okay? One of the other things that I did also change here in this demo code was the change label to hello world. I've now changed that to basically be, change the label that we have here to be the sender text, okay? So whatever text was on the button, it's going to put in there. Question?
Do you upload your demo code to your website?
I will update, I will make this demo code available. And I'll do it either on the website or via Blackboard. Okay. So that was the programmatic UI creation. Any questions on creating stuff programmatically? We still need to set constraints. We're going to do that next. Okay? So when we're setting constraints, we're going to use something called the visual format language. You guys, has anybody used the visual format language before? No? So, you know, normally when you're doing this in the GUI, you control drag, you know, and you kind of say, hey, set trailing space or set the leading space, top or bottom space, that kind of thing. In the visual format language, it's just a way to set the constraints on programmatic views that we've created, like buttons, labels, and sliders. So here's the first thing that you do. Let's assume that we have this thing called a button and a UI label, that those are instantiated and set up and they're all good to go. The first thing that we're going to do is call this set translate auto resizing mask into constraints to no. That is going to tell the view, and you'll see functions like this that completely explain themselves as you read them, right? Set translate auto resizing mask into constraints, no. Do not set the constraints automatically for this button. Right? So when I add it to the view, don't automatically create the constraints. You'll also notice that with these buttons up here, don't specify a frame, right? If you specify a frame, that means you're giving it a size. Those are constraints, okay? We don't want it to have constraints right now. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add constraints right here, okay? So don't pay attention to the variable bindings yet, but there's a thing called ins_array. I'm going to create an array of constraints, and I'm going to call this function, right, which is a function that's being called on a class ins_layout constraint. And I'm going to have it create constraints with a visual format, and then this is the visual format that I want. So what you'll see here is I have this little brace right here, which is basically, I want this to be 8 points from the left side of the screen. So this is the left side of the screen right here. This little dash right here means the default number of points, right? That means 8 points, okay? This right here, button with the brackets around it, that means that is something I've created. It's a button, okay? That's the name of what I've created. Right here, it says there should be 24 points between this button and between this label. Okay? And inside the label, I've got an open parentheses that says I want this label to be the same size as the button. Okay? There was a lot of things I just did there. And then I want it to be 8 points from the right-hand side of the phone.
But you have 24 to the 2 dashes.
So the 24 with the 2 dashes means 24 points in between, right? If I just have a dash right there, it would have been the default 8 points in between, okay? Yeah, the reason that it knows how to interpret button and label right here is through this views variable bindings. And what I've done is I've created a dictionary of the button and the label, and it knows what those names are, okay? So button, it's going to say, that is going to be identified with the string button. Label is going to be identified with the string label. So it knows what those are in the visual format. Okay?
It's considered common practice
To
to do it this way.
do it this way, where you're adding the visual constraints. If you're creating the UI programmatically and you want to use auto layout, you can do it. I like the visual format language better than, they also have functions where you can specify these things individually. Right, so you can specify, to the left-hand side of the screen, 24 points in between, but it's harder to read. I feel like this is actually easier to do if you know the format language, right? So there's a couple of different things that are inside of here, like options and metrics. So what I can do here is I can create a dictionary of metrics that says, okay, the word spacing is going to signify 10 points, right? And now I can do something like this, where the metrics, I give it the metrics dictionary I just created, and I'm going to say spacing right here, and it'll do 10 points in between. Okay?
So what has like the highest priority? So if you don't specify the exact number.
Yeah, so you can actually, so the way that you specify priority is with an @ sign. Right now, everything defaults to priority 1000, which is the lowest priority there. You can set it anywhere between 1000 and 0. Okay, and that basically gives you like hugging constraints, right? So I'm going to say, this, I want it to be 8 points from the side, and I'd like to be 24 points in between this button and this button, but the priority I'm going to set to like 1000, and I'll set this priority to 500, so that I get it to the side, 8 points to the side, and if I have to kind of squeeze in those 24 points, it'll go ahead and do it for me. Okay, that's a little more advanced. You probably won't have to do that. Okay. Now you'll notice here that because button and label, I have not created a rectangle to define them. All that my UI knows is the constraints that I give it, and it will default their size to fit the constraints that I give it. Okay? So this is going to default their size horizontally to whatever gives me the spacing between the left and right-hand side of the phone with the spacing in between. Questions? Matt?
Where does this code live? Would this be in the view controller? Or?
Yeah, I'm going to put this in the view controller. If you really, really were to get down into it, this is probably something that should go in the view itself. But you need some way to kind of to basically fit into the model view controller architecture. You probably want to put this closer in the view, but you're still going to have to tell the view controller things that you want inside. But I'm going to put this in view did load, and that's fine to put it there. Okay? If you really wanted to, you could subclass UI view for your own kind of constraints that you're going to add, but you probably want to add a category to the class rather than subclass it. But you're not going to need to do that for this class. And you probably won't need to do that for developing either. Okay?
The points measure like percentage points, like the screen has 100 points total, or?
It's not pixels, right? It's the points that are on the screen, and that's basically kind of Apple defined. But it's the same points as you'll get if you go to the ruler inspector that's in Xcode, everything is defined in points, and it'll tell you how big the view is right now, right? So whatever you're working on. So if you're working on a, well, it depends on if you're working. If you're working on something that's a non-retina display, the points, it's going to give you the same spacing, but it's a lot different number of pixels, right? So I think there's 320 or something across, but double check me on that.
What if you built something for the Apple iPhone 5? Is it backwards compatible for a smaller screen like iPhone 4?
If you use the auto layout constraints. If you use auto layout, then it will naturally kind of, you know, go into a smaller screen. If you specify, you know, a lot of the points, you know, to where, so if you specify it, you know, to the left and right hand side of the screen, that's great, right? Or if for vertically, right? So if you want, actually, if you want to do things vertically, you just append this V in it right here. So if you wanted buttons that were created from, you know, from the top vertical to the very bottom of the phone, you could create constraints between each of the buttons that way, right? And then it would kind of expand out to, you know, from go to the 4 to the 5 or whatever you wanted it to do. Okay? You can also specify options, right? So if I wanted the button and the label to their tops to be aligned, or if I wanted their centers to be aligned, if I was adding a vertical constraint, in this options, I can basically give it this right here, which is nothing more than a bit mask. Okay? All right. So let's do it. Let's add a visual constraint to these two views. So when I add constraints, I'm going to add constraints to, let's create a constraint between this new button and this button right here. Okay? I am going to use, all right, layout constraint template. That is a snippet that I created. And all it's going to do is add a constraint to the view based on the layout constraints that I give it here. Okay? So I'm going to do basically exactly what I had right here. So I'm going to say I want the button right here. We'll default space in between it and new button. And then I want it to be able to recognize what this text is. So I'll basically create here button and new button. Okay? So now I've got a layout constraint for horizontally how I want those buttons to sit. Okay? I do not have a constraint vertically, so it's still not going to know where to put them. Okay? So if I wanted to set up a vertical constraint, let's see here. So I can set up a vertical constraint like this, where let's say I wanted what should I do? I could set up a constraint like this. So vertically, I want it to be right next to the top, right? Or I could say, you know, maybe I want it to be so 50 points down or something like that from the top, right?
How you would do like a relative percentage of the screen, like you want it halfway down the screen for whatever screen.
So if you wanted it, say, halfway down the screen right here, we could do, what is it, NS, layout, format, align center Y. So I think what that would do is align them in the center here. And we can test that actually really, really quickly. So let's see. Let me go ahead and run this and see what it does. Oh, you know what I didn't do? This. So I want to take these frames out because I don't want to specify any of these frames for when these things get created. Okay. So let's see what that does. And they're both up here. It did not put them in the middle. Okay. And I think the reason that it did that is because this in-out layout format, it aligns the centers of the two objects, not in the center of the phone. Okay. So let me specify option 0 here. So if I add a vertical constraint to one of the buttons, then it's going to automatically center them here. Whoa. Alec and Knit did not get centered. Oh, I didn't set the vertical constraint for Alec and Knit button. Yeah. right? So if I wanted both of these constraints to be 50 points down, I could just do this in an NS array, right? So I could say for ID object in, and then I'm just going to create an array right here. I'm going to have it enumerate the button and new button like this. Right, so I'm going to have it enumerate both of these through here. Let's move this slightly to the right. I'm going to say that this is now object. Everybody see what I did there? Question?
Could you make the font
A little bit bigger, yeah, absolutely. Come on. Fine. Better? Yeah? Okay. So I'll keep that as my default from now on. Okay. So both of those objects should be 50 points from the top. Let's stop, start it. Voila, I feel really happy with myself except for this thing going. Right? But each of those is going to be, right, so press by each of those. So we'll go ahead and set this to be like, I don't know, 150, right? So that they'll go down a little bit more. Okay. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about here, so we got through all of that, is a scroll view delegate. Okay, so part of your homework is to create a scroll view that's inside of here. And the way that you're going to do that is your view controller is going to say, I am the delegate, which all that means is that I am delegate for a scroll view. I implement the methods that are in the scroll view protocol. Okay? Right? So this is a way of kind of your class does not have to inherit from a scroll view. This is a way of getting around multiple inheritance by saying I'm adopting a protocol. Right? So you don't have to have multiple inheritance in Objective-C. Right? So I inherit from one thing, and I implement protocols for these, so you get a flatter design of an object-oriented language. Okay? So that basically means I'm going to have to implement those methods. There's a couple of things that you'll have to do when you set up a scroll view. So let's say you've got some outlet that is some scroll view here. You're going to have to add a subview to it. Right? And a subview is basically whatever you're going to be scrolling across the screen that's inside the scroll view. Right here, I'm creating and adding an image view. Okay? So then you're going to have to set the content size of the scroll view because otherwise it has no idea what size the content is inside of it that you want it to be. And then I'm going to set the minimum zooming scale, right? So you can zoom this down to say 0.1, or you can zoom it out. You can also set the maximum zoom scale here for however they want user to be able to do this, right? So if you had an image, you could kind of pull it across the screen and be able to zoom in and out on it. Okay? Then you're going to set the delegate for this scroll view as yourself, right? That means my view controller is going to be the scroll view delegate. Okay? So you set the view controller as the delegate. You add the view to the scroll view. If you don't add any views to the scroll view, you can scroll around, but there's nothing in it. Okay? And then there's also a bunch of different methods that you can call. So one of the things that you would need to do if you were creating a UI image is you'd have to call this thing view for zooming and scroll view. It's going to give you the scroll view, and you just return the self.image view that I added to the subview. That's what I want it to be able to zoom in and out on. Okay, let's do an example. Okay, so since we just created a bunch of things programmatically, and we have a scroll view that we want to do here, I'm going to go to my main storyboard, and here's my demo view controller. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to get a UI scroll view. Hey, look at that. And I'm going to set it right here. Maybe I want it to be slightly bigger than this. Okay. So the first thing I can do is set up some auto constraints on it. So reset to suggested constraints. Yeah, sure, that looks okay. It's going to always be this distance from change label, this distance from the side, left, and bottom. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is create an outlet for my scroll view. Question?
This is tangent to what we're doing right now, but a little off topic. With Git, when you're doing all the dragging and dropping, and then you try to use something in GitHub to be able to look through your revisions and go back to the repository, more than one person's using it, and it's a very drag and drop interface. How does it display? You able to kind of like keep track? This is something that your partners developed.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like very complicated? Because it's obviously going to be in code format, they're not going to display screenshots of what the different changes are.
Right. So anything that you do here will, like Git will track the changes. It's going to track them as in the serialization of the storyboard, right? So it's not going to save the behavior as a series of clicks to create something, but as long as you're not trying to merge changes on the storyboard, you should be fine. Okay, does that make sense? Right? When you try and merge changes, it's not going to know how to merge two different storyboard layouts into one another. But one thing you can do is just like copy and paste the storyboard if you needed to. Yeah. So let's create an outlet for this scroll view. I'll put it up here. I'm going to call it a button array scroll view, because what we're going to do with it is create a button array. I'm going to create a bunch of different buttons inside my demo view controller. I'm going to do it programmatically. Okay, so scrolling button array. Okay, so I wrote all this code beforehand. And I actually called this button scroll view right here. So let's go ahead and go up here and create this. So this is a button scroll view. Okay, now you'll notice I lost the reference right here. This right here, if I click on this, it says, oh, this is a main storyboard and it's a label. This outlet right here, it has no idea that that's in the storyboard. Okay, so I can go back here. Since I've changed the name, unfortunately, there's no other way to do it other than this. I'll just connect those outlets together so that it knows that that's the same thing in my storyboard. Okay, so let's see what in the world I just did here. Okay, so what I did was I just created a mutable array, right? So that means that I can add objects to it dynamically. I'm going to add 50 buttons right here. And all I'm doing right here in this for loop is for int I to button count, which is equal to 50. I'm going to create a button with the type UI system. I'm going to add the target that we normally had, so it'll change the label. Okay. I'm going to set its title to whatever the button number is inside this for loop, so button %d I inside the for loop. And then I'm going to turn off its auto sizing constraints. Okay. Then I'm just going to add it into the button array. All right? Any questions on that? I'm just creating a bunch of buttons and throwing them in an array. Right here, I'm adding them to the as subviews to the button scroll view. Right? So I'm adding all of these buttons into my scroll view that I created back in the storyboard. Right? Now, what I'm doing is here, for each of these, I'm going to add a constraint. And the constraint is that, okay, I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to go all the way to the count of my array. And I'm going to create these two objects. The first one is the button right before the object that I've currently added in the array, and the current button. Okay? And now I can create a constraint between those two. I'm going to say vertically, I want those object 1 and object 2 to be spacing apart. Okay? So I'm getting an error here because metrics isn't defined. Okay, so what we'll have to do here is we'll create an NS dictionary. Come on. And we'll call it metrics. Right? And the dictionary, the way that we create it is with the curly brace here. And I'm going to give it the key right here. And the key is going to be the word spacing. Right? And the value for that is going to be 10 points. I'll just make them 10 points apart. Everybody okay with what I'm just doing right here? right? So object 1 and object 2 are going to be spacing apart. Yeah? Oh. Okay. All right, and now I'm going to go down here and I'm going to do some things here with the button scroll view. I'm going to set its content size to be the button size times button count plus the spacing times the button count. So my scroll view, the content inside of it is going to be as big as many buttons as I have. And then I'm going to set the scroll view delegate equal to myself, right? But I've got a warning here. Why do I have this warning? Yeah, so I'm saying that the delegate for this scroll view that I've created is me, the view controller. I have not told them that this view controller adopts that protocol. So it's like, whoa, you're setting this to something that doesn't adopt that protocol, right? So I'm going to say up here, UI scroll view delegate, right? So I'm telling them that this view controller, I'm adopting this protocol. Well, it's a flatter design. All that that's saying is that I implement the methods in that protocol for a UI scroll view, right? None of those methods are required. That's why it's not giving me, if any of those methods in the protocol were required, I have to implement those, right? None of them are required here, right? So now, let's see if this works. Oh, it did not like that. So let's see what's going on here. Okay, got a button array, object 1, object 2. I've got metrics that exist. Button with the system, NS number, metrics, spacing, float value.
Are you trying to access the button that would be like before the first button to make it constrained?
No, because I've got this if I is greater than 0 here.
You may have, I don't know much about the scroll view kind of goes everywhere. The 2 buttons you made above would go. You may have.
Yeah, they would be in there, but it should be okay. It's something ridiculous in here. I'm sure of it. Because none of those actually have a rect that it's associated. None of them, I didn't give any of them a frame size. So right now the size of that button is just 0 right now. It doesn't have anything. Normally that size would be created when the constraints are applied to the view. Okay, so unfortunately, yeah, it's a magic number, which is 30 right now, which is telling me it's going to be 30 points long. All right, so let's see what happens here. Let's do a little debugging. Nope, so it happened before then. So this is one of the things with Objective-C. A lot of things happen at runtime. I'm adding subviews to the button scroll view, object, my demo controller. Change label to hello world. Change label to hello world. Oh, for heaven's sakes. You think I put this code snippet in here and that would actually speed things up? Does anybody see anything? See, this is good. This is good debugging for you right here.
Uncut section of type.
It's an endless exception. That's informative.
Scroll up.
This class is not key value coding compliant for the key button array scroll view.
Wait, did we change it to button scroll view?
Yeah.
Reference somewhere to button array scroll view. Control F. Oh, or Apple. F.
Perhaps it is in the .h here. Nope. Button, new button, button, new button, etc., etc. Vertical. Object. Oh, come on. Well, I don't know if it's worth.
What about the storyboard? What about the connection? What was that one? We changed that. We go to the.
Oh,
There it is.
there it is. Okay, so I'm still referencing that outlet, and I was like, hey, where did that outlet go? Did anybody else see that? Who saw that and didn't speak up? I'm just kidding. All right. So now where it's going to be button scroll view right here. Let's see if this works. Anything? Oh. Keep going. Oh, look at that. This is an awesome VI. So anyway, so this is the scroll view that we set up right here. I can click all of these buttons. Click from button 3, button 4, button 7, back up all the way to button 49, 48, 7. Okay. Right. So I've got a bunch of elements and they interact with myself, and I'm in a scroll view and I'm very happy. And it was pretty easy to set up, honestly. Okay. Except for changing the name of the referencing outlet. That's one of those things that'll get you. Okay. Anyway, I'm glad that we saw that, because now that if you see that and it shows up, it's something that might be a little bit difficult to debug, because you don't get that error until runtime. Okay. It compiles just fine. Okay.
Actually, I have a question. If you assigned it and it still had an outlet, but there was nothing doing it, and it's, in other words, how does it pick which view it's loading? Because there's two assigned to the same thing, and you made them both that middle in the story where you made them both assigned to this. So how does it pick which one, or does it?
It would do both.
Oh.
It's just the other one didn't exist anymore. So it was sending a target. It was sending an action to a target that didn't actually have an outlet.
But if it still did exist, what would it actually show? Because you had two assigned and it didn't complain about that. It only complained that one of them wasn't there, but if they're both assigned and they both have their own components allocated,
I assume that it would actually send it to both. Right, as long as they were both inside of this view controller, right? That's the target.
Stuff overlapping.
It would you know, the way that this communication happens is it's not like it has a direct reference to the outlet that it's going to, right? All it's doing is it's sending a broadcast message to hey to the outlet that I have assigned, right? So if it's got multiple ones and they're both kind of listening in, they could both get that message and try and interpret it. And whichever one interpreted it last, if they were trying to both update the same label, would do it. Or if they both, in this case, they both do the same thing, so they wouldn't really have had too many issues.
Yeah.
Huh?
Okay, I see.
Okay, let's keep moving. The table view controller. So this is something you'll have to implement for all of your homework that exists today, or that exists for next week. A table view controller, when you drag it out onto the storyboard, is going to look like this. And you'll have a bunch of different prototype cells that you can click on. If you click on the root view controller, the table view controller, what you're going to get is a set of these where it tells you, okay, all of these cells, I'm going to say, are dynamic prototypes. That means that I'm going to give you each of these different prototypes, and you tell me where you want those to exist in the table, right? So I'll go over that. And prototype cells, I have 4 prototype cells here. Right, so it's got 4 different prototype cells. These are just cells that it's going to use that might have different looks or views, and it's going to use those to do something with them. Okay, so each of these different, I might have a lot of different types of, let's say, a prototype cell. So to make this more concrete, this one right here, if you click on it and you go in here to the inspector, it's going to tell, okay, so I created this as a basic, and I gave it a name. The identifier for this prototype cell, I'm going to call image loader cell. All right? And so now when I actually go into the table view, I'm going to be able to grab the prototype for that cell by specifying image loader cell. Okay, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay. So before we do that, let's actually create that image view controller that I was talking about here. All right, so instead of creating this button array, I'm just going to comment all of this out. Okay, so here's this button scroll view. I would really rather have this be an image scroll view. Right, so first thing I have to do is probably delete that from my storyboard. Yeah. Right here. And let's go back in here and we'll say, you know what, let's just create a new view controller. An Objective-C class. I'm going to call this image view controller. Okay? I'm going to inherit from UI view controller. I'm going to leave these unchecked. I'm going to hit next. Just create it. Okay. So here's my image view controller. And let's see if I actually have some snippets for this. Oh, check. Okay. So here, I'm going to create a bunch of things right here. And I'm going to put them in the interface. So right here, some setters, getters. I'll go over each of this code as we go through it, okay? Okay, so here, let me create this property here, at property. In a string, and it is image name. Okay, so I created some things here. I've got a UI scroll view, which is an image scroll view. Its outlet is not set. I have an image view, which I'm going to use to put an image in. I have an image and an image name. Okay, those are the properties that I have here. So the name of the image, the actual image itself, and then this UI image view. So all of the getters for that, I'm going to use those to instantiate all of those objects. Okay, so getters by lazy instantiation. So I'm going to create this image right here, and if that image doesn't exist yet, someone's trying to get it, we'll go ahead and create it, right? So I'm going to call this UI image, image name, self.image name. Okay? So basically what that's going to do is it's going to create the image for me based on the name that I give it here. And the reason that this works is because I've got this image assets library, okay? And if I want to, I can add images into my class right here, okay? So I can take, I've got a bunch of images right here, and I can just add them into the asset library. Everybody okay with that? They're just a bunch of PNGs, and they have to have an alpha channel. An alpha channel. Red, green, blue, and a transparency, right? So for each pixel, its opacity is this value, right? So that's the alpha channel.
But it doesn't matter what, format the image is saved in, right?
I don't know. I think it may have to be a PNG. You probably can add JPEGs and stuff like that. I mean, the basic things that are there.
No, like,
TIFFs. I mean,
animated GIFs.
I don't think you can do a GIF. Maybe I don't. Well, that's maybe not. That you might be able to. Anyway, I'm just going to add those into my assets library, and we'll do this one. So this one I named Research Banner. Right. So these are just from my website, and I grabbed them for convenience. So in here, basically, I'm going to call this Research Banner. Right. So what's going to happen here is when I try and get an image, it's going to say, okay, that image doesn't exist, right? So self.image is going to be I'm going to set image equal to this UI image, image named self.image name. Now, if self.image name, I'm trying to access it and it doesn't exist, it's going to go in here and it's going to call it research banner. Okay, so it'll grab that from the assets library and put it inside there. Okay, so that's the image and it exists in there. And then I'm going to return the image name and then I'll return the image. Okay. Now, I've also got this image view so that if anybody tries to access the image view that's right there, if it doesn't exist, I'm going to allocate it and init it with self.image. Okay? Questions? I got an image view. I'm setting an image in it from a name. Okay?
You have to put the file extension.
Not if it's in the assets library. I can just put the name of it there, and it knows where it is. That's the first place that it looks. Okay.
So what if there were like two different file types with the same name? Could you not put them both in the same library?
You can put them in separate folders, and then there's a way to access. So you can set up different sets. You can set up different image sets, and the way that you would do it is almost like you would access it through a folder. You could do it that way.
What kind of access do you get to the file system?
If you want to get something from, let's say, people's camera roll, you have to do a special function that interacts with the user to get that image. It's like, so this separate dialogue would come up, and they would have to choose the image that they're allowing you to get, right? And it would also say, the second that you put any of that code in there, when your app loads, the first thing it's going to do is say, this wants access to your photo library. Do you want to give this app access? If they say no, and you try to load images from there, you're just gonna get a runtime error. Okay.
I mean, is that for just images? As far as anything else goes, can you cruise around in the file system, or is that not?
Nope. Your app is here, and Apple is here, around in the iPhone. If they don't want you doing something and you try to do it, they're gonna shut your app down. First of all, they'll never approve it on the App Store because they will test it. Right? And second of all, the operating system itself won't let you access that kind of stuff unless someone's rooted their phone. Okay?
It's much easier in Android. Add your own solution.
Okay, so did I actually call that image scroll view? Hey, look at that. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do in here is go into our main storyboard. And I'm just going to grab another view controller right here. Bam. We'll throw it down inside of here. Let's move this around. I'm going to set this to be the default view controller, right? So that when the app loads, it's going to load this view controller. And the first thing that I'm going to do here is have this, I'm going to have this inherit from my image view controller. All right, so I want it to be an image view controller class.
Is there any way to see, whenever you make changes using this graphical interface, is there any way to see what code you actually changed?
Nope.
No?
There's not. There is code that you're changing and it's behind the scenes, but if you're familiar with like Windows phones or Android, you can get in there and you can like look at the XML for things that are changing. Not here. Not here.
So for example, if you wanted to do that change of the default view controller in the code, what would you do? What function is like start at?
This right here,
Yeah.
it's here.
That's it.
Graphically,
Like there's
it's there.
Yikes.
All right?
That's scary.
Is there anything you can't do from the storyboard that you have to do programmatically in terms of functionality? Because it seems like there's enough.
The storyboard has so much functionality to it, and you're going to want to use the storyboard for almost all of the things that you do, okay? Because it allows you to recycle what you've laid out on the storyboard, okay? Use it. It's your friend. It's good for you.
You do it, the first thing they tell you is never, ever, ever use storyboard. Programmatic.
Matt, question.
Doesn't show up on
If you
create a new project, it's a single view application, and you create that first view, usually comes with a class.
Mhm.
If you're just using the drag and drop editor, you only need a class if you're overriding functionality of that view, right? You don't need to actually create a .h&m for that view if you're just using the default, right?
Right. Yeah. So when you create a single view application, the first thing it does is provide you that view, and it subclasses it to whatever view is you called it, right? So in ours, it was demo view controller, right? So in the storyboard, this is of type demo view controller. It's already subclassed. It's assuming you're going to want to do something with it, and you almost always will do something with it, right? So UI view controller, I mean, it doesn't do anything right now. Okay, so the first thing you'll do is subclass it. Same thing with here. So we've got our image view controller. Let's go to our butler icon. Whoop. Did we create a scroll view inside here? I didn't, did I? Oh. There. And of course, I got to zoom in on it. Okay. So I've got a UI scroll view, and it's completely off-centered. There, right here. We'll reset to the suggested constraints so that it puts some constraints in there so it'll be happy with me. Question?
Is there like a default constraint for if you don't want it to go over the top bar? Do you have to know every time the number of points that the top bar takes up?
You can actually, inside of your app delegate, you can say whether or not this top bar is visible.
Okay, yeah.
Right, so you can do that inside of your app delegate. It's just one of the preferences. I could have also set this to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to assume that it's there. Let me just kind of take this and, oh, come on. If I can select it.
If you set it to be visible, does it just change the frame size? Or so that everything just fits to that?
Well, everything right now is this frame size. Right, and that progress bar is kind of when the bar is over it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So it'll just go over whatever.
So if the bar is visible and you don't want your content going under it, you have to know how many points the bar takes up.
Yeah, but then I mean the nice thing about this is the bar is already here. So if you wanted to, oh come on, oh here. Right, so if I wanted to take the height down a little bit, I could. Like this, right? So I could do something like that. And now when I grab these, I can actually kind of pull it down. And then I could, reset the constraints on it or something. Okay, so, and I'll just leave it like that. What's the next thing I'm going to do? Somebody tell me. I'm going to control drag. I'm going to connect those outlets together. Okay, awesome, perfect. So now, when I go back in here to my image view controller, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to set my research banner this way. And this is basically the exact code that is in the slides. Okay? I'm going to add a subview to my scroll view, which is the image view. The second that I try to access image view, it instantiates it. Because image doesn't exist, it instantiates it. And because the name doesn't exist for that image, it instantiates it. Okay? Lazy instantiation. It doesn't actually instantiate anything until I ask for it. Okay. I set the content size here so that the scroll view knows how big that image is. Okay, so it can scroll around in it. I'm going to set the minimum zooming scale to 0.1 and the delegate to self. Why do I have this? Why do I have this warning? Because I haven't delegated it. UI scroll view delegate here. Okay, so now I'm going to try and run this. My assumption is that it's going to crash because I think every single program we've written has crashed right off the bat. Oh my goodness. Look at this. Okay, so now I've got an image. It's inside of a scroll view, right? And now I can kind of, oh, I can't zoom in and out on it. What's going on? I need to tell it what to scroll on, right? So here, what was that? What was that function called? View for zooming and scroll view. All right, pretty easy. View for zoom. Seriously? Where's my autocomplete? View for skimming and scroll. If I double click it, it's going to create all of that for me. Voila. Oh, come on. Okay, so return. What am I going to return?
Self image view.
Yeah?
Why are you returning self-dot?
That's the view that I want it to zoom in on.
View for zooming in scroll.
Yeah, you can kind of get what you're supposed to do here by looking at the function name. What is the view for zooming in the scroll view? Okay? It's the image view, of course.
So this is just each little cell is going to have one of these view controllers. Or am I saying it wrong?
Cool.
Wait, was it supposed to cover the whole screen? Like, there's the picture's not big enough.
The content of the picture is not big enough, right? But you can see that, like, as I move this around, right, you can see that the banner now is there.
Is there no stretch to fill out?
I believe you might be able to set it as stretch to fill, but I think when you load up an image, the first thing it does is it keeps aspect ratio. It assumes that you want to keep the aspect ratio on that.
Just so that it's pretty.
Yeah, so that it's pretty. Right? Now, if I set this to the right or the left, voila. Good to go. Yeah?
You cannot zoom in that. Like,
Oh, can I not zoom out?
no, that's you got it.
I mean, I can do this, but it resets it to whatever the max zoom is, which defaults to 1. So my max zoom is 1.
Can you also do the double click double touch?
That, I think, is a separate
Is there a separate?
method that you need to call, but it's probably part of the scroll view delegate. Okay? Okay, now, I just got done talking about a table view, but I haven't done jack with that, right? Okay, so let's create, in our storyboard, a UI table view. And what I'm going to do here is, okay, I'm going to click on these objects, get rid of that search. What I'm going to do here, instead of picking table view controller, I'm going to go here to navigation controller, and you'll see why I did that here in just a second. The reason is because it's going to give me a navigation controller, and the first thing that it does is it connects it with a table view controller. Okay? Normally, when you drag out the navigation controller because you want a nav controller, the first thing you do is delete this table view. I'm actually going to use it this time. It might be the only time you ever use it ever. Okay? Voila. So there is my view controller. So I'm going to zoom in on this table view.
Wait, what does navigation controller actually do?
Navigation controller? So this navigation controller right here is, so this is basically embedded inside of a navigation controller. And that navigation controller allows you to, as you go to different, as you get deeper and deeper in the storyboard for your application, it just help orient the user, and you can always go back and, forward and that kind of thing. Okay?
So does it have any buttons?
Yeah, it'll have default buttons up here for, if you don't, it'll be the title of whatever view controller you came from, right? If it doesn't have a title, it'll just say back. Okay, and you get a lot of this functionality just for free for embedding it in the storyboard.
Normally you would have multiple navigation controllers in between every view.
Mhm.
Controller.
That's a lot more of a pain than it is. So I like this.
Right? So, oh, jeez, every single time. Okay, so if I were to click on this cell right here, what I could do is, just like I've got in here in the slides, I need an identifier for the cell that I've clicked on. Right? So I'm going to call it image loader cell. Okay? And now we're caught up in the slides. So I've got an image loader cell. Okay? Well, no, I don't. I actually didn't set it to basic, did I? Let's make sure. Okay, it's a custom cell right now, which means I can do whatever I want. I can add subviews to it. I can add a slider if I wanted to into this thing. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say it's basic, which means that I've got a title. Okay? now, the first thing that we're going to do is subclass that, and then make our table view a subclass of whatever we want to name it, right? So we might call it image table view controller or something. Once we do that, it's going to assume, so if we subclass UI table view controller, it assumes, okay, you are adopting now the data source protocol, right, for the table view, which means that my view controller that I'm subclassing, I need to provide all of the information about what this table is going to display. So one of the functions that I'll have to say is how many sections are in your table view, right? One section if you just want, a bunch of rows together, right? So we'll have one section. The table needs to know how many rows are in each section, okay? And it'll pass in you the section that it's trying to get the number of rows for, and you just return the number of rows in your section, okay? Maybe that's an array that I have here that I'm returning, okay? Then, and here's where the magic happens, it's going to ask you for a cell for row at index path, right? So it's asking you, if here's my index path, this is where the user is in the table, I'm at row 57. What do you want that cell to look like, and what do you want it to do? Okay, so the first thing that it's gonna want is a cell identifier, right? So the cell identifier was image loader cell, right? So that's the prototype that it knows to make. It's gonna dequeue that from a bunch of reusable cells that it's kind of shuffling in and out, right? So it's smart, right? If you've got 1,000 things, it's not loading up 1,000 cells. It's loading up whatever the user has in the view. And it's going to continually ask you, what do I need to load up to make this table scroll seamlessly for the user? Okay? And you're going to tell it, okay, I'm going to load up an image voter cell, and the text for that is going to be here. Okay? So let's do it. Let's create one. Yeah. So let me go in here to Xcode. So we'll go inside. Here's our image controller. And main storyboard. Let's get rid of that. So what I want to do here is I'm just going to control drag from this prototype cell to the image view controller, which means that when I click on this cell, I want it to load up that view right there. I want it to load up this image controller view. So I'm going to go ahead and push it onto the stack right here. I want to start out in the navigation controller. Okay? Right? Now, I haven't told it what to do once I get into my image view controller yet. I haven't told it anything about that. In fact, if I were to run this right now, what would happen? It would crash, actually. But so the first thing that we're going to do here is let's create a new file and subclass our table view controller, right? So that we have control over all the delegates that we're supposed to have. So next, I'm going to call this, well, let's make a subclass of UI table view controller, and let's call it image table view controller. Yeah? Next. Create it. All right, so it's going to do it. And here it is, and it brings exactly what it is right here. So there's all of these functions that I told you are part of the data source, right? All of these things that I need to implement. And it's already like it's got this pragma warning so that it knows that you need to implement all of those. So the number of sections that I'm going to do is 1. I'm going to have 1 row inside that section, inside every single section that I have. Okay? Right, I just wanted to return 1 row right now. We'll actually do something with this here in a second. And now I'm going to configure the cell. Okay? So the cell identifier is going to be the image loader cell. Right? And it's going to return that cell right here. And if I wanted to, I could say cell dot, what is it, cell dot label. I thought it was title, actually. That's interesting. What's it doing to me? Text label. Interesting. Yeah, there it is. Okay. text label.text is equal to an image. Wonderful. This is the greatest UI in the world. Okay, so you guys keep me honest. Okay, so there, I'll be it. So let's see what happens when I run this. Nothing. What's going on? What did I do?
Forgot to connect it.
Did you not forget to connect the outlet?
Oh, somebody's gonna get it. This is like the most common. I do this all the time, by the way.
You started the navigation screen. You were
I start at the navigation screen. Here's the one thing. This right here, that's a UI table view controller, not an image table view controller. I have not told this storyboard yet that that is supposed to be my image table view controller, right? So it was the default implementation. So now let's see if it crashes. And image. It loaded up my thing. If I click on this, oh my goodness. I can do things. I already get a back button. I can go back to my, okay?
The back button was the one you put by the navigation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gave this, oh, it gave this a wonderful name too for my user, root view controller. Okay?
So with the navigation, do you have to have one kind of each layer in between, or is it just kind of one at the beginning and it goes like all the way down?
It will go all the way down. The navigation controller, if I were to click on this image and it were to take me to another view controller, the navigation controller is going to remember the exact process that the user went through to get to the view controller that they're on. And if they keep hitting back, it's going to take them
So
through that hierarchy.
So you only really need one, perhaps.
You need one navigation view controller.
Okay.
And you'll notice in here in the storyboard, the second that I added this to here, it embedded that inside of a navigation view controller. So it put that navigation up at the top already in my storyboard.
Okay.
All right?
How do you make that not happen? Can you ever cut the chain, so to speak, for the navigation?
I've never wanted to.
Yeah, that's like
Wow.
I mean, and there's, honestly, there's a couple of things that you get for free here too. Like I can grab over here and pull back, right? And all of that animation is just kind of, it just happens. Okay, I get that for free. Question.
You can also create a table view first. If you go to, it's one of the links at the top, you can just click embed in the navigation controller.
Yes, and it'll pop it up over there. You can also just drag it out and connect it, and then whatever is connected as a subview of that will just automatically get a navigation controller in there as well. It's the same exact thing.
It's really nice.
You've been watching the Stanford courses.
Now I just play the table view.
Ah, well, whatever.
What's the
I was about to be really impressed.
section and row?
So the difference between section and row. So if I were in here, if I wanted this to actually have more than one section
Like
inside of it,
or
the way that you can do this is
maybe you can get the bottom. Zoom out a little bit. Change the photo.
well, basically, I don't know why I'm not. Let me see if I can navigate to it here. Table view, navigation item, image view controller. There's a way to set the number of sections. Oh, multiple section. Okay, so I could set it to be, oh, not multiple selection. I can set this to actually have more than one section.
I mean, could you just change the
oh, like prototypes.
Oh, it's because I don't have this as a static view controller. I don't know why I'm not trying to do this in code. What I would do is if I set it to have more than one section, then based on that section, I might want to load up, say, a different prototype, right? So I can create as many prototype cells as I want to here, and each of those could, so all of the cells that I create now are going to navigate to a image view controller. I could set up another prototype and have it go to a different view controller, and maybe I want to set that in a different section of the table. right? So if you've ever gone into the settings on your iPhone, that's a huge table, and it's just a bunch of different sections that you can click on and off, and they all do different. Yeah, exactly. Right? So let's do something really quickly. It's the last thing that we'll do today. Is let's go over to my image table view controller, and let's actually create a property in here, which is so at property ns array, and I'm going to create an array of strings. Right? And we'll just call it image names, like this. Okay? So let's lazily instantiate this. So
Is there any way to make it code basically instantiate every comment?
no, because you need to tell it what to do to load things up. Right? Otherwise, it would have no idea what to allocommit. Right? So if I were, did I capitalize that? Yes. All right. So image names, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, what am I going to say? If not image names, then these are a bunch of image names, right? So let's create a bunch of image names right here, like that. And let's say we want to load things from our image assets. So I've got these different banners in here: research, MSLC, and UbiComp. So we'll just do that. We'll say research banner, MSLC banner, and UbiComp banner. Okay? And then return it. Seriously? Okay. So now it's going to create those, right? This is basically my model that I want the table to load things from. So now the number of sections is still 1. However, I want this to be self.image names, and I want it to be the count. Okay, so that's the number of rows. I want it to display the number of items that I have in my array. Right? The text for that, I want that to be my self.image names at the index path.row. Okay, this is a variable that was sent in for me here, which tells me where I am in the table. Okay, and that's the cell that I want to load up. All right, there's one thing that I need to do here with my image view controller. This right here is not part of the public API, right? So I'm going to say I create an image view controller, try and segue to it. I'm going to have no idea. I'm not going to be able to set this property, and I want to be able to set that from my table view. So I'm going to take it out of here, and we'll put it in my public API, right? That way you can set the image name, the NS string, for what I want that view controller to load up. Okay? Happiness? What happens if I run this?
Crash. That's the safe answer.
If it doesn't crash, what is it going to do? So let's say I click on one of these down here.
The image and then go back and it should go the other.
Goes to the same
Oh
one.
my gosh, what's it doing?
Oh, wait, wasn't that the default?
That's the default, because I have not actually set anything in that view controller that it's segueing to. Okay? So one of the things that I need to do here is actually set up, all right? So there's a function in the 2 minutes that we have left here. There's a function called prepare for segue. And I know I've got a prototype in here. And maybe this time when I add a prototype, it will actually just, it'll finally error. Table view cell segue.
Is that stuff you've made or that's
This is stuff that I've made. So and you can create your own snippets, right? So I'll go through this. So there's this prepare for segue function, which every view controller has. Inside of that, I'm actually testing to see what things are. So I've got this sender, which is whoever is sending the message I'm about to segue to a view controller. In ours, that's the table cell, right? We set up that outlet, and we set it, we want, when the user clicks it, we want it to segue, okay? So the sender is actually a table view cell, right? So I'm gonna check for that using introspection here, right? I'm gonna say the sender is kind of class, UI table view cell, yeah. Also, there's this function called, inside this segue that gets sent right here, the variable, there's a function called the destination view controller. And I'm going to say that is kind of class. What kind of class do I want to say that that is? I'm segueing to my image view controller. Image view control. The reason that it's not autofilling is because it has no idea what image view controller is. So import, come on, image view controller. Okay, now all of a sudden it'll be happy. Okay, so I'm going to check to make sure that the destination view controller is an image view controller. Then I'm going to say, okay, so if it's a table cell, my destination is that view controller. Then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to cast the destination view controller to this right here. What?
Yeah, next to I.
Huh. And then, so I called this view controller, and I'm going to say the view controller dot what? Image name. The one thing I put in the public API is equal to the label text. You think this will crash? So research banner, yeah, that already worked as advertised. Let's go back. Oh, hey, we're so happy about this. Look at that. UbiComp banner. Voila. That's from another class you can take called UbiComp. Be great. Okay, that's it. Questions on table view controllers? The only thing we got left is paid view controllers, and you'll be able to do the entire assignment 1. Questions?
It's just gonna be like testing this and test stuff, right? It doesn't actually have to show anything.
It has, your assignment has no point. Your application has no point. Your assignment is to be able to use all of the view controllers, and it does have a point. Okay?
And this is just a practice.
This is your practice app. This is basically the entire iOS Stanford course compacted into 2 weeks. Okay? That's not true because they go into way more detail. Okay? But this is, I want you to know the basics of getting through the UI because we're not going to really touch UI after this. We're going to deal with the sensors on the phone. We're going to do a bunch of cool stuff. All right? So the class will slow down a little bit after this, but this is sink or swim iOS user interface design. Okay, I'm throwing you in and see if you can swim. Okay. So now we have lab. I will be here for another 2 hours. Okay? And if you guys want to be here for another 2 hours and knock out assignment 1, do it. I'll be here.
Can we do it in 2 hours?
I think you can probably do assignment 1 in 2 hours.
Cool. Let's do it.
The only thing I have is for
I just have to find.
Oh, get your teams assigned. If you're not on a team, get on a team.
No, do you mind if I swap? I need a help.